Take the bus, Celia. We need to be here for Tracy. That was what my father said on the morning of my college graduation. At the exact moment they were handing my sister the keys to a brand new Porsche Macan. I stood alone at a bus stop in Austin, wearing my cap and gown. A little further down the street, in the driveway of our house in Westlake Hills, my parents, Candace and Dwayne Marsh, were celebrating Tracy. They placed the keys into her hands. A pearl-white Porsche Macan, gleaming under the sun with a massive red bow stretched across the hood. My mother was crying. Not quiet tears, big, emotional ones. "Oh, my baby," she said, pulling Tracy into a tight embrace. "You deserve everything." My father stood beside them, smiling like this was the proudest moment of his life. Safest and smartest choice out there for our girl. Tracy laughed, bouncing on her toes, her dress perfect, her hair flawless, her life perfectly arranged. She had just finished high school. And me? I had just finished 4 years of college. 4 years I paid for myself, working 3 jobs, skipping sleep, learning how to survive without anyone catching me if I fell. My graduation ceremony was about 30 minutes away, by bus. I had come back to my parents' house the night before, still stupid enough to believe they would show up for me. No one asked how I would get there. No one offered to drive me. No one even looked in my direction. I stood there in my black gown like a shadow, watching a perfect family moment unfold without me. When the city bus pulled up, it let out a long, tired hiss. The doors folded open slowly, almost reluctantly. I stepped inside, handed over a crumpled dollar bill, and moved toward a seat by the window, the glass smeared with old fingerprints. The sticky seat beneath me, the low rumble of the engine, the strangers sitting around me. Somehow, all of it felt more real than the family I had just walked away from. I watched the city blur past the window and made a promise to myself. Not a loud one, not an angry one, something colder and final. This feeling, this invisibility, it would end. And one day, I swore, they would drive for miles in whatever luxury car they owned, just to see my name somewhere they never believed I could reach. My name is Celia Marsh. I'm 23 years old. Before we begin, feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm always curious how far these stories travel. Now let me take you back to where this story began. Growing up in our house felt less like living in a home and more like existing in a museum. A perfectly curated space where Tracy was the main attraction, and I was just the small description card on the wall no one bothered to read. The house itself was beautiful. A large, elegant colonial with black shutters and a porch swing where my mother and Tracy would sit in the evenings, laughing softly while the warm air drifted through open windows. Inside, every wall told Tracy's story. Tracy's first steps. Tracy's bright, toothy smile. Tracy sitting on my father's shoulders at a football game. Tracy wearing a tiara, crowned homecoming princess. There was only one photo of me. A small frame, tucked slightly behind a larger portrait of Tracy riding a horse. In that picture, I was about 7 years old, standing just a little off to the side in a plain yellow dress. Even then, I already knew what it meant. My father, Dwayne Marsh, saw the world through numbers, square footage, investments, returns. He was a successful real estate developer, and he treated our family the same way he treated his portfolio. Tracy was prime property, high value, high return, worth every investment. She was beautiful, charming, effortlessly social, everything he admired. And so he poured into her without limits. Private dance lessons, a personal tennis coach, designer clothes that cost more than my entire semester's textbooks. To him, love was a transaction. They didn't think they were being unfair. They thought they were being practical. He gave, and in return, Tracy reflected success back to him. Every evening when he came home, his first question was always the same. "Where's my princess?" I was something else entirely. Functional, low maintenance, reliable, but nothing special. The kind of property that didn't need upgrades. I was quiet where Tracy was vibrant, focused where she was carefree, and my independence To him, it wasn't strength. It was proof I didn't need anything. My good grades weren't celebrated. They were expected, like a building simply meeting code. I remember one dinner when I was 15. I had just been accepted into a highly competitive summer science program at the University of Texas. I waited for the right moment, my heart beating faster with every second. I got into the program, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My father glanced up briefly from his plate. The science program? Good. That'll look solid on your college applications. Then he turned away from me. Tracy, he said, his tone immediately warmer. Tell me again about your spring formal. We should start thinking about your dress. And just like that, my moment disappeared. My mother, Candace, operated differently. Her currency wasn't money. It was attention. And somehow she never had enough of it for me. Tracy was everything to her. She managed her schedule like a full-time executive, helped with every project, often doing most of it herself, and acted as her best friend, her advisor, her entire support system. Their bond was tight, complete, unbreakable, and I stood outside of it, looking in. Whenever I tried to reach her, it almost always ended the same way, softly, politely, and nowhere. I remember one Saturday afternoon. She was in the garden, trimming her roses with careful, practiced hands. The sunlight caught in her hair, everything calm and quiet. It felt like the right moment. I just wanted to share something small, something that mattered to me. Mom, I started this book and the main character kind of reminds me of... She didn't even glance up. Oh, that's nice, sweetheart, she said lightly. Then without missing a beat. Hey, can you do me a favor and start the laundry? Tracy has her competition tonight, and her outfit isn't ready. We're a little behind. Her tone was gentle, but the meaning was sharp. Tracy's needs were urgent. Mine were optional. I nodded, swallowed the rest of my sentence, and went inside. The words I had wanted to share stayed with me, unheard. The difference between us became even more obvious during the holidays. Christmas, especially, felt like a performance designed entirely for Tracy. One year my father surprised her with a pony, a real one. He had already arranged for it to be kept at a nearby stable. When she saw it, she screamed with excitement, throwing her arms around both of them. The entire morning turned into a celebration of her, gift after gift, each one more extravagant than the last. That same year, I unwrapped a box of encyclopedias and a new desk lamp. To help you stay on top of your studies, my father said with a satisfied nod. It wasn't cruel, not intentionally, but it said everything. Tracy was meant to be celebrated. I was meant to be productive. The moment that stayed with me the most happened in 8th grade, the state science fair. I had spent 3 months building a solar-powered water desalination system. Weekends in the garage, soldering wires, adjusting tubes, burning my fingertips more times than I could count. Nights buried in physics books, pushing myself further than anyone asked me to. When they called my name for first place, the feeling was overwhelming. It rushed through me so fast it almost made me lightheaded. I walked home with the trophy in my hands, replaying that moment over and over, convinced this would finally be it, the thing that made them see me. When I got home, I found them in the living room. They were helping Tracy rehearse for a school play. She had 3 lines. I stood there holding the trophy up. I won, I said, unable to contain the excitement in my voice. My mother glanced over briefly and smiled. That's wonderful, Celia, really. But can you keep it down for a minute? Tracy's trying to focus. My father looked at the trophy for a second. State level, he said. Not bad. Dwayne Marsh's daughter, the scientist. He said it like he was reading something off a page. Detached. Distant. Then he turned back to Tracy. That was it. No hug. No questions. No pride. The trophy suddenly felt heavier than it should have. I took it to my room and placed it on my desk. Not as something I had achieved, but as something that didn't matter. A few days later, Tracy stood on stage and delivered her 3 lines perfectly. My parents gave her a standing ovation. They took us out for ice cream afterward, celebrating her like she had just won an award. I sat across from them, watching my sundae melt into a sticky puddle, and something inside me finally clicked. It was never about how big the achievement was. It was about who it came from. For a while, I tried to change. I tried to be more like Tracy, more outgoing, more expressive, more noticeable. But it felt wrong, like trying to wear something that didn't fit, tight in all the wrong places, awkward, forced, and they noticed. "Don't try so hard, Celia," my mother told me once. "Just be yourself." But what she didn't understand was that I had already learned to be myself. Not because I wanted to, but because I had no other option. The quiet one, the serious one, the independent one, the one who stopped expecting anything because expecting anything only led to disappointment. That independence, it wasn't something I was born with. It was something I built, out of absence, out of silence, out of years of realizing no one was coming. It wasn't strength, it was a scar. By the time I reached my final week of college, life had turned into a blur of exhaustion and pressure. It felt like I was sprinting the last stretch of a marathon that had already drained everything out of me. My world had shrunk to a few places: the university library, my dorm room, and the harsh, fluorescent-lit buildings where I took my finals. Every day was a constant balancing act between studying, finishing my thesis, and working my last shifts at campus security. Sleep became optional, rest became a luxury. But underneath all of it, something else was growing. A small, fragile sense of hope. Because this wasn't just the end of college. It was the beginning of everything after. It was my way out. I had marked the date months in advance. Saturday, May 17th. Graduation day. In my mind, it wasn't just a ceremony. It was proof. Proof that everything I had done, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, meant something. That it was real. That it couldn't be dismissed. Not this time. I imagined them sitting in the audience. My father, trying to stay composed but quietly proud. My mother, wiping away tears as my name was called. I imagined us going out afterward, sitting at a nice restaurant, celebrating properly for once. Like they always did for Tracy. I imagined raising a glass, saying something simple, and for the first time, being heard. That vision had become so vivid, so carefully imagined, that it didn't feel like a dream anymore. It felt like something that had already happened. It was that belief, fragile but persistent, that carried me through the long nights, the exhaustion, the pressure that never seemed to ease. The night before my final exam, I stepped away from my books and walked to a small boutique just off campus. I used the last $70 I had to buy a simple blue dress, clean lines, understated, elegant. When I brought it back to my dorm and held it up against the light, it felt like more than fabric. It felt like a version of me I hadn't fully become yet. Someone steady, accomplished, someone worth showing up for, someone worth being proud of. The next day, when I walked out of my final exam into the warm May sunlight, relief washed over me so suddenly it almost made me dizzy. I had done it. 4 years of pushing, surviving, holding everything together. It was over. For a moment, I felt weightless. I made my way back to my dorm, my steps lighter than they had been in years. I couldn't wait to call home, to finally lock in the details of what I had imagined for so long. I sat down on my bed, took a deep breath, and dialed my mother's number. "Hi, Mom," I said, unable to hide the happiness in my voice. "I'm done. My last final is over. I passed everything. I just wanted to go over the plan for Saturday." "Oh, hi, sweetheart," Candace replied, her tone casual, almost distracted. In the background, I could hear silverware against a plate, soft conversation. She was out to lunch. "That's great news. We knew you would," she added. Then, after a brief pause, "What plans were you talking about?" The question caught me off guard. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. "My graduation," I said, more quietly this time. "The ceremony starts at 10. I sent you the tickets and parking pass last month. I thought maybe afterward we could go to Perry's for lunch. I'll take care of it." I rushed the last part, wanting to make it clear this wasn't about money. It was about them being there. There was a pause, not a short one, the kind that stretches just long enough to make your chest tighten. I heard her speak softly to someone in the background. I caught my father's name. Then the line shifted, and when she came back, something in her voice had changed. Softer, careful. "Oh, honey, about Saturday," she began, and my stomach dropped before she even finished the sentence. "We're in a bit of a bind. Something came up, and we're not going to be able to make it." Everything around me went still. "What?" I said, barely above a whisper. "What do you mean you can't make it? What could be more important than my graduation?" The phone shifted, and suddenly my father's voice replaced hers, firm, controlled, already decided. "Celia, your mother's right. We won't be there. Tracy's gift is being delivered Saturday morning. The timing is tight, and we have to be present to receive it." I blinked, trying to process what he was saying. "Her gift? Her graduation isn't even for another 2 weeks. What are you talking about?" "It's a car," he said, impatience slipping into his tone. "A Porsche Macan. It's a significant gift, and the delivery is coming from out of state. That's the only slot they had. Our hands are tied." Our hands are tied. The words felt almost unreal, as if this were something unavoidable, something out of their control. I pictured them weighing the options, carefully considering both moments, their daughter's college graduation and a car delivery. The image didn't make sense. It couldn't. And yet, somehow, it was real. My mother came back onto the line, her voice wrapped in soft sympathy. "You know how your sister is, sweetheart. She's been so excited about this. It's a big moment for her, finishing high school. We just feel like we should be there for that." I didn't respond, because I didn't understand. I couldn't. The unfairness pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. Every late night, every shift, every sacrifice. I felt all of it at once, and none of it mattered enough for them to show up. "So you're not coming?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could steady them. "Don't be dramatic, Celia," she said gently. "It's just a ceremony. You already finished. A lot of noise for a piece of paper. What matters is that you finished, and we are proud of you." Proud. The word felt hollow. "You've always been so independent," she continued. "You'll figure it out. Take the bus, call a ride, whatever works. You always do." There it was, the label they had given me my entire life. Independent, the one who didn't need anything, the one who would manage on her own. "We'll celebrate when you come home," she added, her tone bright again, as if that closed the conversation. "You should see the car. It's gorgeous, pearl white. Tracy is over the moon." I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, like something solid had lodged itself there. Everything I had imagined, the lunch, the conversation, the quiet pride, collapsed all at once. Gone. "Okay," I said finally. It was the only thing I could say. "Good. We'll talk soon. Love you." The line went silent. I stayed there, sitting on my bed, the phone still pressed to my ear long after the call had ended. The room felt different, colder. I turned slowly and looked at the blue dress hanging on my closet door. Just hours ago, it had felt like a promise. Now it looked out of place, like a costume meant for something that wasn't going to happen. And in that quiet, empty moment, something in me quietly broke. It wasn't loud, not dramatic, just something quiet and final. An irreversible fracture somewhere deep inside me. And just like that, something in me stopped hoping. The last stubborn spark of hope that I might ever matter to them faded out completely, leaving behind nothing but something cold and still. College had never been a dream for me. It wasn't ivy-covered buildings or late-night laughter. It felt more like walking a tightrope over something I couldn't afford to fall into. My partial scholarship helped, but it only covered tuition. Everything else, housing, food, books, even basic things like toothpaste, was on me. The money my parents sent each month barely made a dent. It felt less like real support and more like something they did so they could say they tried. just enough to feel better about themselves, not enough to actually help. I was on my own. And that truth sat with me every single day. My life became a carefully structured routine built around survival. My schedule didn't revolve around daylight, it revolved around my night shift with campus security. At 10 p.m., while other students were heading out or settling in to study, I was putting on a stiff uniform that never quite fit right and lacing up heavy boots. From 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., that job kept me afloat. It was quiet, isolating work, but the campus at night had its own kind of calm. I walked my patrol routes, my footsteps echoing across empty spaces, then returned to a small, sterile guard station to monitor security cameras. That room became my refuge. Under flickering fluorescent lights, I'd spread out my textbooks and work on assignments while grainy footage of empty hallways played across the screens. The coffee from the old machine was weak and tasted burnt, but it kept me awake. That was all I needed. When my shift ended at sunrise, I'd make my way back to my dorm, feeling out of place, like I was stepping into a world I didn't belong in. I'd get 2 or 3 hours of broken sleep before heading to class. Every day blurred into the next. I learned how to sit through lectures, take notes, and look focused while my body was completely drained. More than once, I snapped awake to find my professor watching me, somewhere between concerned and annoyed, with ink smeared across my cheek from where I'd fallen asleep on my notebook. After class, I didn't rest. I took a bus downtown to my unpaid internship at a small, struggling marketing firm run by Victor Hale. My title was intern, but in reality, I did whatever needed to be done. Coffee runs, filing, answering calls, organizing paperwork. The office was cramped and messy, but to me, it represented something more. It was a glimpse of the future I was working toward. I handled the basic tasks, but I paid attention to everything else. I listened to how Victor spoke to clients. I studied the campaign drafts left on desks. I stayed late, long after everyone had left, teaching myself design and web skills, using whatever I could find online. I treated every moment there like it mattered. Because it did. I absorbed everything I could, knowing this experience was worth more than any grade. There was no room left for anything else. Friendships faded. Invitations stopped. I have to work became the answer to everything, until it became a wall between me and everyone else. The loneliness settled in slowly, and then all at once. The only glimpse I had of what a normal college life looked like came through my phone, through Tracy. Her posts were a constant reminder of everything I wasn't living. I'd be sitting in the guard station at 3 a.m., eating a crushed protein bar, my eyes burning from exhaustion, scrolling through photos of her dressed up for some event, smiling like everything in her life came easily. I'd be patching up my worn-out sneakers, and another picture would appear, her on a ski trip in Vail, captioned like it was nothing. Best trip ever. It wasn't just about money. It was about how effortless everything seemed for her. Her life moved forward smoothly. Mine felt like a constant uphill climb with no clear path. The unfairness didn't explode into anger. It settled deeper than that. A heavy, quiet tension that stayed with me. Over time, I learned how to use it. That feeling became fuel. Every post, every reminder, every contrast, it pushed me harder. It sharpened my focus. But there were moments when it almost broke me. One week during midterms, everything collapsed at once. I worked double shifts, barely slept, and studied nonstop. I lived on vending machine coffee and crackers. My last exam was calculus. And walking out of that room, I knew I hadn't done enough. The numbers stopped making sense somewhere along the way. I went back to my dorm, sat down on the floor, and for the first time in years, I cried. Not quietly, not briefly, just pure exhaustion. For everything, for how hard I had pushed, for how alone it felt, for the possibility that it still might not be enough. For a moment, I thought about giving up, about calling home and admitting I couldn't do it. But then, that image appeared again, Tracy, smiling, carefree, and right after it, my mother's voice. "You'll figure it out." The tears stopped. The shift was immediate. That cold, steady determination came back, stronger than before. Failure wasn't an option. Quitting wasn't an option. Because there was no one waiting to catch me if I fell. No backup plan, no safety net. There was only me. And in that moment, at my lowest, I made a different kind of promise. This wasn't going to break me, it was going to shape me. Every bit of exhaustion, every lonely night, every hour I pushed through when I didn't think I could. It would all become the foundation of something real. Something strong enough that they would never be able to overlook me again. My internship at Victor Hale's firm became my real education. Victor was a rough, constantly overworked man in his late 50s, always stressed, always moving, rarely patient. But underneath that, he had a sharp instinct and a good eye for people. And he noticed me. But not for the reasons I wanted. One morning, Victor called me into his office, closed the door. "You're slipping," he said. And for the first time, I didn't have an answer. That was it. No anger, no lecture, just quiet disappointment. For a second, I thought I had pushed too hard, and it still wasn't enough. I walked out of that office with something heavy in my chest. And that night, I stayed, long after everyone else left, not to prove him wrong, but to prove to myself that I wasn't done. He saw that I wasn't there just to fill space on a resume. He saw that I was hungry. While other interns counted down the minutes until they could leave, I kept asking for more. I reorganized old files, rewrote website copy just to practice, and left detailed notes on his desk with suggestions for client campaigns. Most days, he barely reacted, just a grunt. But sometimes, he'd glance at me over his glasses and say, "Not bad, Marsh, not bad." And from him, that meant everything. The shift came on a gray, rain-heavy Wednesday. We had just lost a major client, a local car dealership that had been carrying a large portion of the company's revenue. The entire office felt different. Quiet. Heavy. Victor stepped out of his office looking more tired than I had ever seen him. He walked over and dropped a thick, dust-covered file onto my desk. "Here," he said flatly. "A graveyard. Leads from the past 10 years. Small businesses we couldn't close or couldn't afford us. Go through it, make a spreadsheet, stay busy." It wasn't important work, just something to keep me occupied. But when I wiped the dust off the cover and opened it, something clicked. This wasn't a graveyard, it was something else entirely. Opportunity. Inside those files were stories, real ones. There was a woman named Martha who owned a small bakery, Golden Crust. She had written a letter about her grandmother's recipes, about what baking meant to her, about the history behind every item she sold. There was a faded photo of her storefront, poor lighting, barely noticeable. There was Brian, who ran a family auto repair shop passed down through generations. His customers trusted him, but his business was slowly losing ground to larger chains. A tailor, a bookstore owner, a craftsman who built custom guitars. Each file told the same story in different ways: passion, skill, and invisibility. I spent the next 2 weeks going deeper. I didn't just list them in a spreadsheet. I built profiles, looked them up, found their outdated websites, their empty social media pages. They were all good at what they did. Better than good. But no one paid attention to them. They were being pushed aside by bigger companies with bigger budgets. Firms like ours didn't prioritize them. Their margins were too small. Their growth potential wasn't worth it, so they were ignored, left behind. And somewhere in that process, I saw myself. I was the overlooked daughter. They were the overlooked businesses. Same pattern, different form. The world paid attention to people like Tracy, polished, visible, already supported. But what about the others? The ones doing the work without recognition? Who was standing up for them? That question stayed with me. That night I couldn't sleep. The idea didn't come slowly. It hit all at once, clear, sharp. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. What if I built something for them? Not another agency chasing big clients, but one focused entirely on the small ones, the ones with real stories, the ones no one else cared about. What if visibility wasn't something reserved for those with money, but something anyone could earn if their story mattered. We wouldn't just market businesses, we'd give them a real chance to be noticed. A chance. A lifeline. We'd stand behind the ones everyone else ignored. The name came to me right then. Northbridge Growth Lab. A way forward. A bridge between effort and opportunity. From that moment on, it was all I could think about. I stopped using the library just for classes. I started studying business models, marketing strategies, startup systems. I filled notebooks with ideas, pricing structures, service packages designed specifically for small budgets. At the office, I used whatever tools I had access to. Built a simple logo. Printed my first batch of business cards. Nothing fancy, just real. The day after my graduation, the one no one showed up to, I didn't go home. I took the $2,500 I had saved over 4 years and made the biggest decision of my life. I knew I had maybe 3 months before I ran out of money. I found a listing for a small, windowless room in a basement on the edge of East Austin. Bare concrete walls, 10 by 12 feet, damp air, no natural light. It cost $450 a month. To anyone else, it would have felt like nothing. To me, it was everything. I bought a second-hand laptop, picked up a used desk and chair that barely held together. That was it. That was the beginning. Northbridge Growth Lab. My first client wasn't Martha. The first 3 clients failed. Completely. No results, no growth, no second chances. For a moment I thought they were right about me, that I was nothing special. Then came Martha. Golden Crust Bakery. I walked in on a quiet Tuesday morning, my pulse loud in my ears. She stood behind the counter, flour dusting her apron. The smell inside the shop was warm, comforting, but the place was empty. I told her what I saw, that her product was good, that her story mattered, that I had a plan. She listened, kind, but cautious. "I've heard this before," she said. "Big promises, big costs. I can't afford that." I had already prepared for that answer. "You don't have to pay anything," I said. "Give me 1 month. I'll build your website. I'll run your social media. If nothing changes, you owe me nothing. And you keep everything I build." This time, my voice didn't shake. She studied me for a moment, long enough to really see me. The nerves, the urgency, the determination I couldn't hide. Something in that must have felt familiar to her. "All right," she said finally, a small smile forming. "You've got yourself a deal." That month moved fast. I spent my days inside her bakery, taking high-quality photos of everything she made. I sat with her, asking questions, learning the story behind her recipes, her grandmother, the reason she had started in the first place. Then I built it all into something visible. A clean, welcoming website that told her story. An Instagram page filled with images that made people stop scrolling. A small, targeted Facebook campaign focused on people within a few miles of her shop. Nothing flashy, just focused, just intentional. The results came quickly. That Saturday, a line formed outside her bakery, something she hadn't seen in years. People walked in holding their phones, asking for items they had seen online. By the end of the month, her revenue had multiplied several times over. She came to my small basement office, her eyes filled with emotion, and handed me a check for more than we had agreed on. That moment stayed with me, because it wasn't just about the money. It was proof that this worked, that what I had built out of necessity could actually matter to someone else. Golden Crust became my first real case study, and my best advertisement. Martha told Brian. Brian told someone else. And slowly, steadily, my client list began to grow. One small business at a time. I wasn't just the girl working out of a basement anymore. I had become something more. A resource. A solution. For people who had been overlooked just like I had. My days stretched longer, 16, sometimes 18 hours. I handled everything myself. Strategy, design, client meetings, campaigns. And at the end of it all, I was still the one sweeping the floor. It was exhausting. But for the first time, it felt like it meant something. I wasn't just working. I was building something that connected people, something real. After a year, the basement wasn't enough anymore, and by the end of the second year, everything began to shift faster than I could keep up with. There were more clients waiting than I could take on. The business was growing, slowly but steadily, and I knew I had to take the next step. So I did. I signed a lease for a real office space in South Congress. The place was nothing like where I started. High ceilings, exposed brick, large windows that let in natural light. Open, bright, alive. The rent alone was more than everything I had saved the year before. Signing that contract felt like standing at the edge of something huge, terrifying, but necessary. With a real space came something else. A team. The first person I brought on was Lena Brooks, a talented designer I found online. Sharp instincts, quick humor, and a way of seeing things that made everything better. Then came Noah Whitman, a writer who could turn even the simplest business story into something people cared about. I didn't just hire for skill. I hired people who understood what it meant to be overlooked, people who had something to prove. And together, we built something stronger than just a company. We built a culture. One where effort mattered, where people fought for each other, where every small win felt earned. The energy inside that office was constant. Late nights, cheap food, endless coffee, but also belief. Then came the opportunity that changed everything. A small local startup approached us with an idea no one else believed in. They had already been turned away by bigger agencies, too small, too niche. But I saw something in them. I took them on at a reduced rate. A risk, but one I was willing to take. We gave everything to that launch. The story, the branding, the campaign, every detail mattered. And when it went live, it didn't take off. Not at first. But then, something shifted, small at first, then undeniable. The app spread quickly, gaining attention far beyond what anyone expected. Within months, it was everywhere. 6 months later, they were acquired in a multi-million-dollar deal, and in every interview, they mentioned us. Northbridge Growth Lab. That's when things began to shift. But not overnight. There were months of trial and error, campaigns that didn't convert, clients who walked away. But the pattern was clear. We were getting better, stronger, more precise. And then, everything started to change. Suddenly, we weren't just local anymore. Calls started coming in from other cities. Bigger clients, bigger opportunities. People wanted to know who we were, what we had done. My life shifted faster than I could process. I was featured in Forbes Austin, invited to speak, recognized. What started as survival had turned into something sustainable, then profitable, then scalable. By 24, I was running a company worth millions. And then one day, on the way to a major meeting, something caught my attention. I was sitting on a city bus, looking out the window, and I saw one of our ads, printed on the side of another bus passing by. For a moment, I just stared at it. The contrast hit all at once. I had built something real, something big, and yet, I was still riding the same bus. Not because I had to, but because I hadn't yet decided who I wanted to become next. That night, I walked into a car dealership. The showroom was filled with polished surfaces, bright lights, and rows of expensive cars. My eyes passed over them without much thought, until I saw it. A white luxury SUV near the front. Clean, perfect, familiar. Too familiar. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then I turned and walked away, out of the showroom, to the used lot. That's where I found it. A Jeep Wrangler, a few years old, dark green, slight wear on the edges. Not perfect, but solid, real. It didn't try to impress anyone. It didn't need to. It felt right. I walked back inside and found a salesman. "I'll take the Jeep," I said. "I'll pay in full." The expression on his face, that was something I wouldn't forget. Driving that Jeep off the lot stayed with me in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't excitement. Not the kind that comes from owning something new, something shiny, something meant to impress. It was quieter than that. Heavier, real. It was the feeling of standing on something I had built entirely on my own. That car wasn't a gift. It wasn't handed to me as a reward for being someone's favorite. It wasn't wrapped in a bow or tied to anyone else's approval. It was 3,000 pounds of steel and rubber that I had earned, every inch of it paid for with my own effort, my own exhaustion, my own persistence. I gripped the steering wheel, turned up the radio, and pulled out into the streets of Austin. And as the city stretched out in front of me, something shifted. For the first time, it didn't feel like I was passing through it. It felt like it was mine. Every mile I drove felt like a quiet victory. That second-hand Jeep, scratched, imperfect, unpretentious, held more meaning, more control, more dignity than any brand-new luxury car ever could. Because it was mine in a way nothing else had ever been. About a year later, the next turning point came. A venture capital firm based in New York reached out. They had been tracking our growth for months, watching how we operated, how our clients stayed, how our work spread without needing noise. They saw something in us, something different. They flew me out for a series of meetings. For a week I moved through a world that used to feel unreachable, glass-walled boardrooms, long polished tables, people who spoke in numbers large enough to reshape entire industries. They questioned everything, my financials, my growth projections, my leadership decisions. They challenged every assumption. But I didn't feel small. I didn't feel intimidated, because I had known something harder than this. I had known what it felt like to sit alone in a dim security office at 3 a.m., fighting sleep, eating stale crackers, wondering if everything I was doing would ever amount to anything. Compared to that, this wasn't pressure. This was opportunity, so I didn't shrink. I negotiated, not just for capital, but for control, for the direction of the company, for the mission I had built from the ground up. I made it clear that if they came in, they didn't get to change who we were. On the final day, they presented their offer. They wanted to partner. They valued Northbridge Growth Lab at $30 million. For a brief moment, the room went still. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I understood exactly what that number meant and what it didn't. It wasn't validation from them. That part had already happened, long before this room. This was scale. This was expansion. This was the next chapter. I signed the agreement. My hand didn't shake, not even slightly. That night, I flew back to Austin. I didn't call my parents. I didn't feel the need to. Instead, I called my team. We went out together, to the kind of place I used to only pass by, never enter. We sat around a long table, laughing, talking, replaying every step that had led us there. That night wasn't about money. It was about everything we had built from nothing. Every overlooked business we had helped. Every risk we had taken. Every moment we chose to keep going. It was a win for all of us. The girl who had once been told to take the bus now had the means to build something far bigger than anyone had expected. The years that followed moved fast, faster than I could fully process. We expanded into new cities, opened new offices, hired more people, took on larger clients. My life became a constant rotation of flights, meetings, and decisions that affected hundreds of people. Spreadsheets, strategy sessions, endless calls. And somewhere in the middle of all that motion, something else happened. I became the person I had once imagined. Independent, respected, untouchable in the ways that used to matter. The wounds from my childhood didn't disappear, but they dulled, covered over by everything I had built. My team became my family, my company became my home, and the people I came from became something distant, like a photograph from a life I no longer lived. For nearly 5 years, there was nothing from them. No calls, no messages, no attempts to reach out. And eventually, I accepted that silence. It felt mutual, unspoken, but understood. They stayed where they were. I stayed where I had built myself. Then one afternoon, everything shifted. I was in a strategy meeting at our Austin headquarters, working through ideas for a major campaign. The room was alive, focused, intense, full of momentum. My phone rested on the table in front of me. It vibrated. I had a rule about not checking calls during meetings, but for some reason I glanced down and froze. One word on the screen. Mom. Time didn't just slow, it warped. The voices in the room faded into something distant, muffled, almost unreal. My chest tightened, not gradually but all at once. Sharp, immediate, like something buried had been pulled to the surface without warning. I stared at the screen, and memories came flooding back in fragments. Her voice, her indifference, the way she had sounded when she told me she wouldn't come. It all felt close again, too close, like no time had passed at all. Celia? Someone across the table said, watching me. You okay? I blinked, forcing myself back into the present. I need to take this, I said quietly. I'll be right back. I stood up, my legs feeling slightly unsteady, and walked out of the room, into my office. The floor-to-ceiling windows stretched out in front of me, the city skyline filling the space, a view I had earned piece by piece. I stood there for a moment, breathing, letting the feeling settle. Then I answered. Hello. My voice came out controlled, flat, colder than I expected. Celia. Oh, thank goodness. I wasn't sure you still had this number. It's been so long. Her voice hadn't changed. Still soft, still familiar, still able to sound warm and distant at the same time. I do, I said. Nothing more. Well, I know you must be busy, she continued, her tone bright, almost rehearsed. But I just had to call. Your father and we're so proud of you. He saw the Forbes article, went out and bought copies, and that deal, 30 million. I just sat there thinking about it, about how far you've come. Our daughter, a CEO. Our daughter. The words landed wrong, they always had. I didn't respond. I let the silence stretch between us, long enough to be felt. But she moved right past it, as if it didn't matter, as if it never had. Well, she went on, we were just saying how it's been far too long. We would love to come see your office, really see what you've built. Maybe come up this weekend, take you to dinner, spend some time together. I stood there listening. After 5 years of nothing, no calls, no messages, no apologies, they were back. Just like that. As if nothing had happened. As if they had always been there. And for a moment, I didn't answer. Because I wasn't sure which part of me they thought they were speaking to anymore. They weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because of what I had become. Because of the life I had built. Because now, I was worth something to them. The realization was so obvious it almost felt embarrassing. Clear, transparent, predictable. A colder part of my mind stepped in, steady and precise. I didn't react emotionally. I didn't push back. I decided to let it play out, to see exactly how far they would go. This weekend won't work, I said, my tone controlled, flat. Next Wednesday, 2 o'clock. I have a 1-hour window. I said it the way I would schedule any other meeting. Nothing more, nothing personal. Oh, Wednesday is perfect, my mother replied quickly, her voice bright with relief. That sounds wonderful. We'll finally have a proper family reunion. We're so excited, sweetheart. We'll see you then. And just like that, she hung up, leaving behind a silence that rang louder than anything she had said. The next few days were worse than I expected. I couldn't focus. My patience wore thin. Small things irritated me. My team noticed, even if they didn't say anything directly. I was waiting. And I hated that I was waiting. On Wednesday, at exactly 1:55 p.m., I stood by the window in my office and watched them arrive. My father pulled in first, driving a massive black SUV that looked excessive even for him. Right behind it, perfectly polished and gleaming under the sunlight, was Tracy's white Porsche Macan. It looked untouched. Perfect. Like nothing had ever changed. Like that moment years ago had simply frozen in place. I had my assistant greet them downstairs and bring them up. When the elevator doors opened, I was already there. Still. Composed. Neutral. My mother moved first, stepping toward me with open arms, wrapped in the familiar scent of expensive perfume. The hug she gave me was light, almost performative, contact without weight. "Celia," she said warmly, pulling back to look at me. "Just look at you. So elegant. And this office. It's even more beautiful than in the magazine." My father stayed where he was for a moment, then stepped forward and shook my hand. His grip was firm, measured. His eyes moved across the room, scanning everything, evaluating the artwork, the space, the people. "You've done well, Celia," he said. It wasn't praise, it was an assessment. Tracy barely looked up from her phone. "Hey," she muttered, distracted, her thumbs still moving across the screen. I nodded once and turned. "Let me show you around." My voice was smooth, professional, detached. I walked them through the office, explaining each department, introducing them to my senior team, pointing out ongoing projects. They smiled, nodded, but I could see it. They didn't understand any of it. They saw success. They saw money. They saw something impressive. But they didn't see the cost. They didn't see the nights, the pressure, the years of building something piece by piece with no one behind me. To them, it was just the result. We ended the tour in my office. My mother moved toward the window immediately, reacting to the view with soft exclamations. My father examined my desk, running his hand lightly along its surface. Then my mother turned back to me and smiled, a perfect smile. Polished, calculated. "You know, Celia," she began, her voice light but deliberate, "seeing all of this, it's truly inspiring." There was a pause, then she continued. "And Tracy, she's always been creative, just like you. She has this wonderful idea to start her own online fashion boutique. She has vision, she really does. She just needs a little support, a little guidance." Her eyes locked onto mine. "We were thinking, with your experience, your resources, you could help her get it off the ground." There it was. Not hidden, not softened. The real reason. The call, the visit, the sudden pride. This wasn't a reunion. It was a proposal. A transaction. After everything, I was still just a resource. Just something to be used when convenient. Only now the scale had changed. Tracy didn't have direction, and I was expected to provide it. Silence settled into the room, heavy, dense, carrying years of everything that had never been said. I stayed where I was, near the window, my posture still, my expression unreadable. I didn't answer. I let it sit. I wanted them to feel it, the weight of what they were asking, the weight of what they had done. My mother's smile flickered just slightly. For the first time, Tracy looked up from her phone, her expression shifting into something sharper. Expectant. Slightly annoyed. It was my father who stepped in. Of course it was. He cleared his throat and moved forward, settling into the role he understood best. The negotiator. "Celia," he said, his tone measured, controlled. "Let's look at this practically." He gestured lightly, as if laying out terms. "Your sister has talent. She's already worked on her concept. She's identified suppliers, started shaping a brand. What she needs is capital. And the right marketing approach to launch effectively." His hand moved, indicating the space around us. "You've built something impressive here. It wouldn't take much for you to allocate a small portion of your resources. A modest investment. A bit of your team's time to build her platform, run initial campaigns." He paused, then finished. "It's the least you could do." The least you could do. The words didn't echo. They settled. Cold, heavy, final. I didn't look at him. Instead, I turned slightly and looked down through the glass. The parking lot stretched below, and there it was, the white Porsche, parked in the center, gleaming under the afternoon light, untouched, perfect, a symbol that had never needed to change. In that moment, I could almost feel it, that earlier version of me, standing beside me, wearing that stiff graduation gown, holding that bus ticket, waiting for something that had never come. My father took my silence as hesitation, as consideration. He stepped closer, placing a neatly bound document on my desk. "We've already prepared everything," he said. "A full plan, financial projections, structure." He tapped it lightly. "We see this as a family venture. You provide the capital, the launch, the infrastructure." A small pause. Then, almost casually, "And we'll consider it you returning the favor for everything we've done for you over the years." That was it. That sentence. That was the line that cut through whatever was left. Returning the favor. The audacity of it was almost breathtaking. What favor? The favor of growing up invisible in my own home? The favor of being met, over and over again, with quiet dismissal? The favor of being left alone on the most important day of my life, so they could stand in a driveway and celebrate a car? For a moment, everything inside me went still. Not calm in the way people describe peace. Cold, precise. The anger I had carried for years didn't explode. It sharpened, condensed into something clear enough that there was no hesitation left. I knew exactly what I was going to do. This wasn't about getting back at them. It was about telling the truth. I turned away from the window and walked back toward my desk, slow and deliberate. I didn't look at them. I looked at the document they had placed there. The neatly bound plan, polished and professional, built on the assumption that I would say yes. I picked it up, felt the weight of it, then set it aside. I sat down. The leather chair sank slightly beneath me, soft and controlled, grounding me in the moment. Across from me, my mother smiled, small, quick, certain. She thought this was done, that I had already agreed. I opened the top drawer of my desk and pulled out my personal checkbook. Not the company account. Mine. Money I had built myself, piece by piece, without them. I could feel their attention shift instantly. Every movement I made, watched, measured. There was something almost physical in the air. Expectation, greed, entitlement. I uncapped my pen. "You mentioned returning a favor," I said quietly. My voice wasn't raised, but it carried, steady, heavy. "To do that properly, we should be precise." I paused, then looked up. "Tell me, Dad, how much was a city bus ticket in Austin, back in 2019? The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was explosive. My father's expression broke first, confidence replaced by confusion so complete it almost looked absurd. "What are you talking about?" "The bus fare," I said evenly. I held his gaze. "The one you told me to take, to my own graduation." I tilted my head slightly, as if considering. "I think it was around $1.75, but let's be generous, round it up, account for everything else." A small sound escaped my mother. Sharp, choked. Tracy finally looked up fully, her expression shifting from boredom to disbelief. My father's face changed color in real time, draining, then flushing, anger rising fast and uneven. I didn't look away. My hand stayed steady as I filled out the check. The date, the names, Dwayne Marsh, Candace Marsh. In the amount line, I wrote clearly, $1. Then, in the memo line, bus fare. I tore the check free. The sound was clean, final. I stood up and stepped forward, placing it within reach of my father. He stared at it, then at me, as if it didn't make sense, as if it couldn't possibly be real. "Take it," I said. My voice had changed, no softness left. "This clears everything." I didn't rush the words. "This is full repayment for every form of support you believe you gave me. Financial, emotional, any of it." I held his gaze. "We're even now." He grabbed the check. His hand wasn't steady anymore. He looked down at it, then back at me, anger breaking through in uneven bursts. "After everything we've done for you—" "What have you done?" I cut in. The control I had held cracked, not into chaos, but into something sharper. "What exactly have you done?" I stepped closer, not retreating, not softening. "You ignored me for as long as I can remember. You celebrated her for existing while I had to earn every ounce of acknowledgement." My voice tightened, but didn't break. "You chose a car over my graduation." The words landed harder now. You left me to get through 4 years of college mostly alone. No real safety net, no real support when it mattered. I took another step forward. And now that I built something out of that, out of everything you didn't give me, you walk in here and talk about returning the favor? I let the silence hit, then finished. This isn't an insult. I nodded toward the check in his hand. It's an invoice. My voice dropped, steady and final. You're paid. A beat. And we're done. He didn't respond right away. Just stood there, the check clenched in his hand, words caught somewhere between anger and disbelief. My mother was crying now. Not loud, just quiet, shaken tears. Tracy looked between us, stunned, like she had never once considered that the world might not revolve around her. We're leaving, my father said finally, the words tight, controlled. He threw the check onto my desk. It landed lightly, like it weighed nothing. He grabbed the folder, turned, and walked out without another word. My mother hesitated only a second before following him, her hand pulling Tracy along. And then they were gone. Just like that. I stood there, watching the door long after it had closed, waiting for something, relief, satisfaction, anything. But none of it came. There was no victory in it, no release, just space. Too much of it. The silence that followed didn't stay in the room. It followed me. Into my car, into my apartment, into everything. For years, I had been moving forward with something driving me. Something sharp, relentless, fueled by the need to prove them wrong. And now, that force was gone. Burned out. All that was left was something quieter, colder. An emptiness I hadn't expected. I had said everything. I had won. Completely. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like standing in the aftermath of something that had already ended a long time ago. The wound hadn't closed. It had just been exposed. Without the fight, without the resistance, I felt unanchored. For a week I moved through everything without really being there. Meetings, decisions, conversations, all of it happened. But I wasn't fully inside any of it. My team noticed. I could see it in the way they looked at me. Concerned. Careful. But no one asked. And I didn't offer anything. Then one night, staying late, I found myself staring at my screen without seeing it. My attention drifted to a photo on the shelf beside me. Not my family. Never them. It was a picture of me and Martha, taken a year after her bakery turned around. We were both covered in flour, laughing like nothing else existed in that moment. I remembered that day. Not the details. The feeling, simple, clear. The kind of satisfaction that didn't come from proving anything to anyone, just from knowing you had made a difference. That was the moment something shifted. Small, but real. The fog didn't disappear all at once, but it began to lift. I realized then that my quiet revenge couldn't end with a single moment. It couldn't just be that confrontation. It couldn't just be tearing something down. If it was going to mean anything, it had to build something lasting, something that existed beyond them. I understood, with a kind of clarity that left no room for doubt, that real victory wasn't destructive. It was creative. It had to take everything I had been through, the neglect, the loneliness, the years of being unseen, and turn it into something that could actually matter to someone else, something that could carry weight, something that could help. My story had been a source of pain for most of my life, but it didn't have to stay that way. It could become something else. I thought about who I used to be. That girl at the bus stop, cap and gown slipping out of place, standing there alone, watching her own family celebrate someone else. I felt like I had disappeared from their world, and the thought came with a certainty that almost unsettled me. There were so many others like her, not just one, not just a few, thousands. Students who were doing everything right, working hard, pushing forward, carrying more than they should, without anyone behind them. They were working multiple jobs, skipping meals, trying to hold themselves together through exhaustion and doubt. And all the while, they were being told that these years were supposed to be the best time of their lives. They weren't. Not for them. They were the ones no one talked about, the ones who kept going anyway. The real underdogs. That was when the idea settled into something solid. Not a passing thought. Not a reaction. A decision. Forward Path Foundation. The name came easily. It took the one thing I had carried for years, that bus ride, that moment, and reshaped it. Turned it into something that moved forward instead of holding me back. But I knew immediately it couldn't just be about money. Tuition alone wasn't the real problem. It helped, yes. But it didn't fix the isolation. It didn't give someone guidance. It didn't replace the absence of belief. So I built something different. A full support system. A foundation designed not just to fund education, but to sustain the people going through it. Our mission was simple, but precise. Support students who were chasing their goals without support, or in spite of it. Give them what I didn't have. I poured myself into it with a kind of focus I hadn't felt before. This wasn't driven by anger. This was something steadier, something I could control. I used everything I had built through Northbridge. The connections, the resources, the people who trusted me. I assembled a board carefully, people who understood responsibility, who could build something that would last. Lawyers, advisors, financial experts. And then I made the commitment that mattered most. I funded it. $10 million. Not as a gesture, as a foundation strong enough to hold something real. We structured the scholarship to be complete. Full tuition, housing support, books, living expenses, and a small emergency fund, because I knew exactly how fragile everything could be when one unexpected expense could change everything. But the most important part was something else. Mentorship. Every student we selected, every fellow, as we called them, was paired with someone who had already built a path in their field. Someone who could guide them, support them, remind them that they weren't doing this alone. Because that was the part I had missed the most. Not money, belief. The applications came in faster than we expected. Thousands of them, from everywhere. Each one a story, each one a life carrying something heavy. I didn't stay distant from it. I read them myself, every single one. And they stayed with me. Stories of resilience that didn't ask for attention, but deserved it. A young man from a rural town, trying to become the first in his family to graduate, while being told that leaving meant abandoning where he came from. A young woman who had grown up in foster care, holding on to a dream of becoming a social worker with nothing to fall back on. And then, there was one application that stopped me. Lena Carter. Her story felt too familiar, too close, top of her class, small town, a clear, focused dream to become a teacher. But her parents didn't believe in it. Not really. To them it was unrealistic, impractical, something she should outgrow. And then I reached the line that stayed with me. They told me that if I go, I'm on my own. They won't come to my graduation, not for something they don't believe in. Maybe later, if I prove it was worth it. I stopped reading, because I didn't need to. I had already lived that sentence, not word for word, but close enough. That feeling of not being enough, of needing to earn belief that should have been there from the beginning. I called her myself. When she picked up, she didn't say much at first, just listened. And when I told her she had been selected, there was silence. Then it broke. She started crying, not softly, not carefully. It was the kind of sound that comes from holding too much for too long. And without thinking, I felt it too. "We believe in you," I said. The words came naturally, because I knew exactly what they meant. You don't have to prove anything first. You're already enough. A year later, we held our first foundation event. Every fellow was there. In one room. Stories that had started in struggle, now standing in front of me, real and moving forward. Meeting them in person was different. It made everything tangible, real. During the event, Lena spoke. She stood at the front of the room, steady, composed, no trace of the uncertainty that had lived in her application, and she spoke about what the foundation had given her. "This didn't just pay for my education," she said. "It gave me people. It gave me support, but more than anything, it showed me that I wasn't invisible, that what I wanted mattered. Her voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. I learned that my path was valid, that I didn't have to wait for someone else to approve it. I sat there listening, and something settled inside me. Not excitement, not pride, something quieter, something I had been looking for without realizing it. Peace. Not because of what I had built for myself, but because of what it had become for someone else. The space inside me, the one shaped by years of being overlooked, dismissed, and quietly pushed aside, began to change. Not in a dramatic way, not overnight, but slowly and undeniably. It was no longer filled with anger. It wasn't filled with money or recognition either. Instead, it was being filled with something far more meaningful, the success of others, the lives that were moving forward because of what I had built, the quiet, undeniable proof that my pain had not been wasted. That became my quiet revenge. Not something loud, not something destructive. I wasn't interested in tearing my family down anymore. What I had created was something far more powerful. It was about building people up, about taking the deepest wound of my life and transforming it into a purpose that reached beyond me. A purpose that created new beginnings for others. Years passed, and life settled into something full and steady. Northbridge Growth Lab continued to grow, expanding beyond anything I had once imagined. The Forward Path Foundation reached hundreds of students, each one carrying a story that mattered, each one stepping into a future that once felt out of reach. My days were no longer defined by what I lacked. They were defined by what I was building. The sharp ache of my family's betrayal didn't disappear entirely, but it softened, fading into something quieter, something that no longer controlled me. In its place, there was strength, calm, grounded, and no longer dependent on anyone else's recognition. Then one evening my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I opened the message. It was a photo, slightly blurred, taken at dusk. A highway stretched across the frame, and there, rising above it, was one of our foundation's billboards. A student stood smiling on it, confident, steady, no longer invisible. Beneath the image were the words, "Your future starts here, Forward Path Foundation." And just to the side of the billboard, almost outside the frame, stood my mother. For years, I had imagined them seeing my name. I just never imagined it like this. For a moment, I simply stared. Then another message came through. "We're proud of you, Celia." That was all. No apology. No acknowledgement of the years of silence, of absence, of everything that had been left unsaid. Just a statement. But it was the sentence I had spent the first 2 decades of my life waiting to hear. I looked at the image again, at her standing beside something I had built out of everything she had failed to give me. And I waited for the reaction I used to imagine. Anger, satisfaction, some sense of victory. But none of it came. There was no surge of emotion. No urge to respond with everything I had held inside for so long. No need to remind her of what had been done. Because the truth was, that need had already disappeared. Quietly, completely. I no longer needed her approval. I no longer needed their acknowledgement. I had already proven everything that mattered. Not to them, to myself. I typed a reply, simple, clear, final, "Thank you. I built this on my own." And this time there was no hesitation behind the words, because I understood something I hadn't before. I hadn't succeeded in spite of them. I had succeeded because I chose to keep going. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Don't build your life waiting for someone else to finally see your worth. Because sometimes, they won't. And if you tie your progress to their approval, you'll stay stuck in a place you were never meant to live in. What saved me wasn't proving them wrong. It wasn't success, money, or recognition. It was the moment I stopped asking for permission to believe in myself. You don't need applause to move forward. You don't need validation to begin. You need consistency. You need discipline. And most importantly, you need the courage to keep going when no one is watching. There will be days when it feels unfair, when you're working twice as hard and getting half the acknowledgement. Keep going anyway. Because one day, you'll look back and realize something powerful. The strength you were forced to build became the very thing that carried you further than anyone expected. Not them, not even you. And if this story touched something in you, if you've ever felt overlooked, pushed aside, or like you had to fight quietly just to matter, please take a moment to support the channel. Hit like so this story can reach someone who needs it right now. Share it with a person who might still be standing at their own bus stop moment. And in the comments, tell me where you're watching from. I truly read them, and I want to hear your story too. If you believe in stories about rising from nothing, about turning pain into purpose, about becoming someone you once needed, subscribe and stay with me. Because your story matters more than you think, and I'll see you in the next video.